Today we're going to talk about EITMS, which is Engine Idle Temperature Management System. We're going to show you how to turn it on, we're going to show you how it gets activated, and how to disable it. Check it out. EITMS comes free on most bikes these days, maybe all the bikes. I know all touring models have it. EITMS started on the 2007, 2008 touring models for Harley-Davidson. For the 07 models, you had to get a software flash to get that enabled and turned on. For 2008 and above, as long as the 2008 model was built after December 3rd, 2007, it was pre-installed on the bike. For these new touring models like what I have, the 24, obviously it's been pre-installed on those for many years. And I believe after 08 was when they first started doing that. When I first got my 2015 Ultra Limited, I wasn't really sure about the EITMS function. I didn't like the way it idled. Obviously it changes the idle because you're shutting off the rear cylinder. And what EITMS does basically is once a certain set of conditions are met, and all of those conditions have to be met for it to enable, for it to activate. If it's enabled in the system, it will activate. It shuts off the rear cylinder, so it generates less heat for the rider. It's basically a rider comfort feature. Once all those conditions are met, and we'll discuss those in a second, it will activate the system and it will shut off that rear cylinder and basically just be an air pump until you either let out the clutch, give it a little bit of gas. To deactivate it, one of a number of different things have to happen. To activate the system, the throttle position must be at idle. The engine speed must be less than 1200 RPMs. The warm engine idle speed on this bike is 850 RPMs, which is below the requirement for this system to activate. The motorcycle speed must be below 1.2 miles per hour. The engine temperature sensor has to hit a certain preset value. I don't know what that is. The manual does not state what that is. The ambient air temperature has to be above a certain preset level. So somewhere in the software they have coded in what temperature the engine has to be at, what temperature has to be outside. Now activation and enabling are two different things. Enabling is turning the system on so it's ready to come on when you need it. And according to the manual, you only have to do that one time. And I was under the impression at first that every time you started the bike, you had to re-enable this system, which is not true. So to enable it, roll the throttle forward and hold it for a couple of seconds. And you'll see the cruise control indicator flash green on the screen, which I'll show you that here in a second. And then to disable it, you do the same thing. Once you enable it and you come to a stop sign and say it's 90 degrees outside and your idle is below 850 RPMs, which it would be because your bike's warm, you're moving less than 1.2 miles per hour and your throttle position is in idle position, which at a stoplight you would be unless you like to rev your bike. The minute you spin that throttle back, it's going to deactivate it. And like I said, to activate it, all of those conditions have to be met. Bike speed, throttle position, ambient temperature, engine temperature, and engine speed. But to deactivate it, only one of these conditions have to be met, and it will shut off right away and go back to normal idle. The ambient air temperature sensor drops below the specified preset, whatever that might be. If it's 95, if it drops below 95 degrees outside, it's not going to activate, or it's going to deactivate. It already is activated. The engine temperature sensor drops below the preset level. Throttle position is above idle, so the minute you twist that throttle, even in the least amount, it's going to turn the system back off and it's going to start pumping fuel back to that rear cylinder. Motorcycle speed exceeds 1.9 miles per hour, so the minute you start rolling, but like I said, once you let out the clutch, it doesn't matter. It's going to turn it off anyway. Engine speed exceeds 1350 RPMs, or the clutch is released with the motorcycle in gear. So if you stop at the light and you have it in neutral and you let off the clutch, then the system can still activate it as long as those other conditions are met. But once you let the clutch out while you're in gear, it's going to reactivate that. It's going to disable that system and reactivate the rear cylinder, and it's going to start pumping fuel again. It's going to start firing, and it's going to go back to its normal operating. Now on this bike, I've really never had it. It's only come on once. I bought this bike in April of this year, and summer down here is a lot hotter than it was in Indiana, and I've only had it activate on me one time. I try to keep it enabled because it gets dang hot. It's only actually came on one time, and I remember when I had my 15 Ultra Limited, it was on a lot. It seemed that bike ran a lot hotter, and this bike seems to run way cooler than that bike ever did. And even my 2020 Street Glide that I had before this one ran a lot hotter than this one, and it activated several times when I was riding during the summer months too. So this one, it doesn't really come on as often, which is good, but when it comes on, I'm glad, because it's definitely cooler for me. I can tell a big difference when I'm riding this bike. So it definitely does not get as hot as the one I had before. On my 2015 Ultra Limited, it was way hotter, and even without, during the cooler months with the lowers, and I had the lowers on, it kept the heat in. So I probably should have kept it enabled, but I just couldn't stand the way it sounded when it idled on that bike. It just really changed the idle. And on this bike, it doesn't change it as much. You can't really tell as much. And I always worried that maybe the cars next to me could hear the way it was idling and think maybe there was something wrong with my bike. So I didn't like to have it on. I've kind of gotten over that since I'm here, because it doesn't really matter what they think of how it idles. But honestly, somebody sitting next to me in traffic probably doesn't even notice that the idle's different. So I don't worry about it too much. And like I said, the idle on this bike doesn't change much like it used to. So I just keep it on, and thankfully you don't have to do that every time you get on the bike and get off the bike. It doesn't disable itself. But I'll show you real quick how to enable it. All right, so to enable this, I'm gonna roll the throttle forward and hold it for about 3 seconds. And while I'm holding that throttle forward, it's gonna flash this cruise control light, green there. That tells you that it's enabled. And then you don't have to do it again. It's not something that has to be turned off and on every time you ride the bike, so that's a good thing. And to disable it, if you want to turn it off, you do the same thing. You hold throttle forward, and it flashes brown. Looks like brown. It says red in the book, but it's actually yellowish. Well, thanks again for stopping by and watching the video. I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to the channel. If you haven't and you're new here, please consider subscribing, and please leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts, and ride safe out there. We'll see you on the next one.